Welcome back. It's still HOTSEAT with me, Akintayo, and we're still at the UNEC headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where we're looking at Africa land policies and so many things in mineral resources in the rich continent of Africa. And I still got Dr. Sifo Moyo and Mr. Peter Nhove of the Associated Mine Workers Union of Zimbabwe. Sifo, let's go to the big issue. The World Bank report saying that, yeah, these countries with vast resources in Africa, they're making so much money, but there's this slow development of the GDP. Why is it so?
Yeah, I can tell you it is really the paradox of plenty. And Peter touched on something just now which really speaks to it, is that you're finding that this mineral wealth in Africa, which has so much potential for development and growth and poverty eradication, tends instead to exacerbate poverty rather than eradicate poverty. And so that's why you find, it's exacerbating poverty. You find human rights abuses like he just talked about. You find conflict in the Congo and, previously in Sierra Leone, in so many countries. I mean, we're seeing it in Marikana, So you find conflict, you find human rights abuses, you find, just incredible and, unacceptable levels of suffering as a result of, of this wealth and this paradox of plenty. So I really just want to go back to the issues, the basic issues, which are going to help us to resolve these things. Peter talked about the need for mine workers to be engaged. And it's the framework that I provided yesterday in the meeting, which is it's important for the public sector, the private sector, and the people. That's my PPP, public, private, people, to come together, and really negotiate, the terms of engagement, negotiate these contracts, negotiate, the transparency, so that we really begin to see a transformation. And it's an incredible opportunity for this continent, by the way. The fact that, we have these resources, there's such a high demand for these resources from countries like China and, and others. So it's an opportunity for us really to re-engage, to renegotiate. The example of Botswana is one that makes all of us very proud, because the Botswana government has renegotiated with De Beers at least 3 times since the discovery of diamonds in that country, And so you can see that the level of human development in terms of just public services, that government provides for the citizens is unparalleled. The government of Botswana pays for education until, as far as you want to go. And they will pay for your education, for the education of their citizens, no matter where in the world they are. That's outstanding. Similarly, they were the first country to provide ARVs for HIV for free to their citizens, and they continue to do that. So, you may talk about, incomes not being very high in Botswana and so on, but that's not the point. Let's look at the human development indicators. And that's what is important, So I think it's important to engage the public sector, the private sector, and the people, meaning civil society, the mine workers unions, and so on, come around the table, discuss these issues of transparency. And I think the ultimate thing, quite honestly, is the need for these legally binding measures. Okay.
Well, let me quickly ask, let me ask Peter, you're about the second most powerful organization in Southern Africa, talking about the mine union, because in fact during the elections, during the campaigning, the politicians always come to lobby to talk to you. But why are you not using that power to even lobby them to do the right thing?
This issue you are raising, it has been raised in some circles. That maybe instead of just blindly supporting a party, we should put conditions, much the same way I think NUM does in South Africa, or COSATU in general does. It puts conditions. Maybe it's an idea.
Yeah, because that's what I don't really know. Like in Zimbabwe, you're from Zimbabwe. Like COSATU is very powerful. ANC cannot do anything without COSATU. In fact, some people think COSATU is part of the ANC. So that's what I'm looking at. It's like elections are coming in Zimbabwe, even in Zambia. So it's like, why don't you use the opportunity to make the change right now?
Yeah, a number of people have actually raised that issue. We hope that going forward we adopt a similar position as COSATU. But it won't be easy because some people have already taken positions. But we need to engage those parties which we support and make sure that they factor in the worker concerns in their plans.
Does it mean that's like, Peter, that there's a split that's not making everybody to come together and give out your conditions?
It's at federation level there is a split. There are those who deemed the last Congress unfair, and they actually went to the courts, and they lost their case. But still, there is no unity even as I speak. Although many people are working towards ensuring that the two parties unite. Even the judges themselves have actually indicated that maybe the two parties need to sit and come to an agreement, because it doesn't serve the interest of the workers to have two federations in a small country like Zimbabwe.
Yeah, Peter, let me play the devil's advocate. Then why do we have to now blame the government, we blame the investors who come in, who want the profit and who want to cash in on your disunity?
But look, we have got areas where we surely can improve. But does it mean that whatever government is doing is correct because we are not united?
Then
they've got their own weaknesses as government, and the investors have their own weaknesses. They are just after one thing, after profit. And we are saying at times the government is not very, very helpful to us. And yes, we've got our problems, we need to sort them out, but it would help if government put conditions also which favor workers.
But don't you think it would help if you all come together as one instead of having different factions, and these people are taking advantage of this at the expense of your workers?
I agree. It would work better for the workers if we're united. But things they don't normally happen the way we want them to do, because maybe of ideological differences, and people move supporting one party at the expense of another. Because, like I said earlier on, these political parties, they want the vote from the workers, and they will do their utmost to make sure that they do that. So what it means is that there will be lobbying from different parties. They lobby senior members of the unions, and to think that maybe there won't be members of the union who will gravitate towards one side towards one side or the other. I think you will be expecting too much. Because of that, we do find that within the top hierarchy of the ZCT, there will be those who support ZANU-PF, there will be those who support MDC. That's where the split actually arises.
Okay, let me drop towards Dr. Moyo's side. We just heard from Peter, and that's one of the things I always try to analyze. A lot of times people blame government, they blame the investors. But we just heard from Peter, even within the unions that are supposed to fight this really, really strong forces, there's still that split. They can't really come together to have this formidable opposition. But we have policies, great policies from your organization, which are targeting the grassroots and unions like Peter's. But when they're not together, really, really strong, like Peter would want, how will you be able to help?
Look, I have a lot of sympathy for the mine workers and the citizens, African citizens, across this continent, because I think what we're focusing on, all of these issues are really about poverty and the potential that the mineral resources provide to our countries to really reduce extreme poverty. Let me give you an example just to put things in perspective. In 2010, the revenue that came from minerals on the continent was over $300 billion.
Wow.
$300 billion compared to aid
from the Western world.
Yes, which was about 48 billion, less than 50 billion. It's a factor of 7 or 8, you know. So just think about that potential. So I think we need to really just focus on how do we, you know, harness these resources so that they benefit the citizens, so that we reduce the inequalities, so that we reduce these human rights abuses, so that we reduce the conflict, you know, and so that governments ultimately are more accountable. Because for me, I look at natural resources really as the next big source of development finance that must be absolutely, you know, harnessed. And that must absolutely be leveraged, because in a sense, the global financial crisis, you know, is almost a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, because I've heard so many analysts saying that Africa should not even feel it at all, even when the rest of the world is feeling the economic recession. Yeah. But so yet, the people are still...
So with the global financial crisis, which means that, you know, these sort of traditional donors are dealing with their own fiscal pressures, I think it's really time for us as Africans, together with our leaders and the mining companies and the citizens, meaning civil society and so on, it's really time for us to come back to the table and talk about how do we leverage and harness these resources so that they're benefiting us, they're, you know, creating employment, they're creating infrastructure. Look at Botswana. Botswana has actually been sort of ahead of the curve, you know, in any case. But even more groundbreaking, more recently, Botswana has come up with the legislation that requires all the polishing and cutting off, you know, the diamonds to be done in Botswana. The implication of that is that the high-end jobs are coming home. Unlike when when all you're doing in Africa is drilling and digging, meaning that you only have the blue-collar jobs, and the cutting and polishing is being done, you know, overseas. You know, so I think it's the bigger discussion we need to be having that will address, you know, the micro issues.
Yeah, but Dr. Moyo, I would like to ask this very important question. $300 billion coming from Africa.
From mining.
From mining,
yes.
Yeah. Where does it go? Is it the people that are giving back the 50 billion that get the 300 billion and give Africans just, take 50 billion for your aid?
I think the problem is really about distribution. Yeah, it's about equitable distribution. That number, for me, what it should impress upon us is the potential. And that's with even the suboptimal level of governance, of good governance, you know. So you can imagine if we get our governance indicators right, you know, which is the transparency, the accountability, the participation, you know, and so on and so forth, that number can double. You know, that 300 billion can double to 600 billion. So that just, for me, is an indicator of the potential that Africa can very easily, you know, finance its own development rather than being dependent for financing its development. And I think that's something we need to focus on. So that, looking at that potential, should really spur us, and particularly our leaders, to realize that it is time for us to re-engage, you know, sign smarter contracts, put in place legally binding measures, ensure that, you know, the taxes and royalties are equitable and, you know, proportionate, you know, and so on to the actual revenue that comes from these.
Peter, the elections are coming up in Zimbabwe very soon. Yes. Don't you think this is a time to get things right, especially for your workers? Like, they will come to curry your favor. You're going back home soon. Would we be hearing from you, like really talking to government that this is our time? So if you want to get back to power, or maybe you want to take over from whoever is there now, you have to take care of us.
My personal belief is what I mentioned earlier on, that I believe that we shouldn't, as Labour, we shouldn't just blindly support any party because it's fashionable to do so. I think we need to really sit down and put conditions which are favorable to the workers. That if the party promises to meet A, B, C, D, then they will get our vote. It's like I indicated, it's something which people are talking about. Let's hope that we'll come to a point before the elections where we make that demand as maybe a unified constituency.
That's exactly what I want to hear. But the thing is, like, you are here at the conference, the ADF 8 forum. What are you going to tell people from around the world who are gathering to talk about your plight?
We are going to, to indicate, mining is a very difficult and very dangerous job. And we witness a lot of accidents in mines, and some of the effect of mining come years maybe after retirement and things like that. And we are saying that all these things should be factored when you come to rewarding the workers, and when you come to considering the conditions under which those workers get. And we are saying that the employers should understand where the workers or where the miners are coming from when they make their demands, and that the governments themselves should factor that in when they are negotiating or when they are giving out these contracts. That at the end of it all, we want the miners to benefit as well as the community, as Dr. Moyo has indicated.
Okay, we'll go on another commercial break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about issues regarding the governance of natural resources of Africa. I still got Dr. Moyo here, also Peter Ohome from Zimbabwe. It's still Hot Seat with Akintayo.